Hello everyone, this is lecture 7 and part 1 of the unit 4, and this lecture is in continuation with the previous lecture, that is lecture 6 and part 2 of the unit number 4. In previous lecture we have seen you have seen how to create how to implement the content provider class, and we have seen some abstract methods of the content provider class. And in this lecture we will see the remaining abstract methods of the content provider class, and we will see the contents of main activity.java file, and then we will run the application and observe its behavior. Okay, so already we have seen the abstract method, that is insert, on create and query. Now we will see the remaining methods. Okay, so next remaining method is called as the update, and this update method is used to modify the say values or records, existing records in the content provider, and it accepts the arguments like a object of URI, then content values, then a string variable, and say string array. So there are these 1, 2, 3 and 4 arguments that will be accepted by this update method of content provider, and this values of these arguments will be provided by the calling class, which the class which calls this particular method. Okay, in update method what we are doing here, we are setting the value of count variable, which is of type integer, to 0, and then we are checking the switch statement for the value of URI method dot match, and we are passing this value of URI which we have received into this update function or update method, right? And if value of URI is URI code, it means and value of URI code is the one which we have set in the beginning of this particular class in declaration part. If the value of URI is URI code, then we are updating the count here. So count is equal to db.update, and we are passing the name of table here, which is users in this case. It means table underscore name. This is the string variable whose value is the users. Again, we have declared this table underscore name string variable here. Okay, so users value will be replaced with this particular variable name. So update, and then values, whatever values we have received in this particular variable, these values will be passed to the update method, and these two parameters, selection and selection arguments, are taken as it is from these arguments of the update method. Okay, and whenever this update method is executed successfully, it will return the number of rows that or those have been updated into the database table, and those number of rows updated will be stored into this count variable, right? And if URI code say URI does not match with these particular cases, then it will throw an exception and display a proper message, right? And again we have to notify this change to the content URI through the content resolver. That's why we are getting context, then getting content resolver, and calling notify change, and we are passing the URI and second parameter as a null. And finally we are getting the count of the value of count variable, which reflects the number of rows or records that have been modified. Okay, this was about the update method, abstract method of the content provider class. Now one method remaining is that is called as the delete method. Okay, and as its name suggests, this abstract method which we have implemented here in our class is used to delete a particular record from the database. It accepts 3 parameters. First one is the URI content, another is the string variable whose name is selection, it may be anything, and third parameter is this, say string arguments, string array whose name is string arguments. Again we have taken here integer variable count whose value is initialized to 0 initially, and here we are specifying the URI matcher dot match, and we are calling specifying this URI to this match function. Okay, and we are passing this value to the switch case or switch statement, right? So what does URI matcher does? This URI matcher matches the contents of this URI contents of this URI content, and it will return some particular count. Okay, if this kind of URI content matches, then it will return value of 1, otherwise it will return a 0. That is why here in the first case URI code whose value is 1, if the this match returns the value of 1, then this case will be become true and this code will be executed. And in this code what we are doing, we are deleting a particular record by calling delete method on the DB object. Remember, DB object is the of type SQLite database, which we have declared here. This is the DB object which is of type SQLite DB database. Right, so we were here at the delete method. So db.delete, and it accepts name of table from which the particular record has to be deleted. Selection indicates which record we need to delete, and selection arguments specifies from which array it has to be deleted. And if the URI does not matches with the given URI or received URI by this delete method, then it will display, or it will throw an exception, and it will display a proper message with unknown URI and the value of that particular URI. Okay, but if record is successfully deleted, again it should be get notified to the content resolver. That's why we are getting context, then getting content resolver, and we are calling notify change on this content resolver and passing the value of URI. Second parameter is a null, and finally we are returning the value of count variable, which indicates the number of records which we have deleted using this delete method. Right, now last method, which is whose name is the get type. Its return type is a string, and this get type method accepts the content URI as an argument, and this value of URI will be provided by the calling class. Again, this received URI will be matched using match function of the URI matcher, and if its value is 1, that is URI code, then it will return this particular content URI, that is vnd.android.cursor.dri/users. Okay, so at this particular location our table is stored, so it will return this string as a type of this particular URI. If URI code doesn't match with this case, then it will throw an exception, and it will display a message unsupported URI, and whatever value of URI will be there, it will be displayed in the concatenation of this static string. Right, so these were the implementation of 6 abstract methods of the my content provider class. But here actually steps you have to follow while implementing content provider is that first you have to create an Android application, then you have to create your class that is inherited from the content provider class. Okay, and after that immediately you don't go to implement all the abstract methods of the content provider. So before implementing the abstract methods of the content provider, you have to need to create a database in order to store a data. So in this lecture we have before going to the database creation, we have implemented these all 6 abstract methods, but my suggestion will be that one, after creating your content provider class, then you need to create database, see database, and then you need to implement the 6 abstract methods. Right, now we have seen 6 abstract methods definitions. Now we will move forward to the database creation part of the particular class. Here in this example, I have created database in the same file, that is my content provider.java file, but it can be implemented as a separate file called as say given any relevant name, that for example say database helper class. But in this example I have implemented database creation part as well in the same file. So at the end of this class, so from this onwards, this onwards, this this is the part of database creation. Okay, so first of all we need to create an object of the database to perform or execute various queries. That is why we have declared here one object of the SQL database whose name is DB, and we have seen each and every abstract method of the content provider is using this DB object for various purposes. Okay, second variable which we need to declare is that the name of database. Okay, in this case we name of our database is the user DB, and this user DB name is stored into the database underscore name variable whose type is of type string. And remember, all these variables are of type static and final, which indicates that these are the static variables and these are final. Final means constant variables whose value will not be changed at all. The next variable we need to declare is that name of the table, in which we are actually going to store the data or modify data or deleting data, etc. etc. It means various operations can be carried out on that particular table. Okay, so in this case name of table is the users, which is stored into the variable name table underscore name. Now here this user DB is the name of database. Under this database we have created a table with the name users. The next step or next variable is for database version. We are declaring database underscore version, and it is the first version of the database. Right, then next string variable is actual the query which we need to fire in order to create a database table. Okay, so its type is again static final, its type is string, and this is the name of the string variable, which is create underscore DB underscore table, and its value will be like this one. So this create table is a static string, and we are appending here table underscore name, which is a string variable whose which value is the users. Okay, so it will be like create table, then space, then table name. Okay, so in this comment section I have specified this one. So up to this it will reflect this one. Okay, so this create table is the static strings, and there is one space, and we are concatenating the value of table underscore name variable whose value is users. So it will be create table, then space users, and again we are concatenating one static string whose value is this one. So ID, integer, primary key, and auto increment. It means in bracket we are specifying the say name of column whose name is ID here. Its type will be an integer and it will be a primary key, and it will be set to the auto increment property. It means whenever any record is added, value of this ID will be automatically incremented, and wherever particular record is deleted, that value will be deleted from that particular column. That's why we are setting the type of this column to integer, and it is a primary key, and it is set to the auto increment property. Okay, so this is a static string, right? And there is one comma and one space is given here. Okay, and then again another static string is here, name space text space not null. It means this is the second column of the table in the our query statement. Okay, so in total it will generate a query string which looks like this one. So create table users, name of table is users, and these are the column names. So first one, name of first column is ID, and name of another column is the name whose type is text and which should not be null. Okay, it should be a contain same value, right? So this is the create underscore db underscore table is a string which contains the query in order to create a table in our database. Now after declaring all the variables which we require in our database creation, next step is to creating a database. Okay, so for creating database, here we are creating one class whose name is database helper. It is user defined class which is inherited from the SQLite open helper inbuilt class. Okay, but remember I have defined or created this class in the same file in which my content provider.java is implemented, but you can implement this as a separate class, and you can use this class by creating its object into this my content provider.java file. Okay, so here I have created one database helper class which is inherited from the SQLite open helper built-in class. Then it is the constructor of this database helper class which accepts an object of type context, and this context is provided to the base class using the super keyword. Okay, see here we are calling we are calling the base constructor of the base class. It means SQLite open helper class using the super keyword, and we are passing the context of this particular application, and then we are passing database name as a second parameter. In this case database underscore name is the string value, say a variable name of string which contains the value of users db. This is the actual value of the database underscore names variable. Okay, then third parameter is null, and last one database underscore version. In this case it is set to the 1 here, right? And then after executing this statement, it will initialize the proper our base class constructor with the proper values, and next step is to creating a table into a database. Okay, this particular statement will create a database, and after creating database we need to create a database need to create table into this particular database. So for that this onCreate function is used. It means when your database helper class is created first time, then it will call its onCreate function. Again onCreate function accepts object of type SQL database. Okay, and it's SQL database, and in onCreate function we are calling exec SQL method of the SQLite database, and this exec SQL method accepts a query string which we need to execute on the database. Okay, in this case we are passing create underscore db underscore table a string type variable whose value is this one, right? This is create underscore db underscore table. Eventually it will form this type of string which will create a table whose name is users and which have two columns. First one is id, another is a name. These are the types of these columns, right? So whenever this db.exec SQL function is executed, it will create actually fire this SQL query, and it will create a users table in the database whose name is users db, and it will have two columns. First one is id and another is the name. But right now this table is a blank, only table structure is created here. Okay, and another method is that which is called as the on upgrade. It is whenever there is a change in the database, then this on upgrade method of this particular database helper class is called, right? And it has three parameters. First one is the object of SQLite database, another is the old version of which is out of integer, and last parameter is the new version, again its type is the integer. Okay, and here we are executing say one query that is called as drop table if exist and table name. Okay, it means if we have some change in the database, then we have to update that into our database. That is why we are deleting the previous tables using the drop table command. Drop table if exist, it is the static string and it is the name of our table underscore name, whose value is the users, which is declared here. Okay, what this particular query does, if table is exist with this name, it will be deleted that table, and again it will call the on create function of this database helper which is here, and it will pass the db which is the object of SQLite database. Okay, and again this on create function will create a new database with the same query as given here. In this way, whenever there is a change in database, then this on upgrade method is called, and the previous version of database is deleted and new database is created, right? Until now we have seen how to create a content provider class, then how to create a database using SQLite object of the SQLite class. Then we have also seen the implementation of the 6 abstract methods of the content provider class. Now next step is to we'll focus on the definition or contents of the main activity .java file. So these are some import statements which are required in our class. Already we have seen the layout file of this particular activity underscore main.xml file. Now we will see the what logic is implemented in this main activity .java file. As usual, it is extended from the app compact activity, and here at the beginning of this class we have declared one variable whose name is name edit text and its type is edit text. Okay, this is because we want to extract the value which is entered by the user into this particular edit text. Okay, that is why we have declared one object of type edit class, right? Now there is a on create function of the main activity. As usual, it sets the whatever layout we have defined in activity underscore main.xml file with this activity, and then it will also associate the definition of edit text from our resource file using the find hue by id, right? So find hue by id r.id.name text name, it indicates to the our layout file, and in layout file it indicates to this particular edit text whose id is, see here, id of the edit text is the text name. Okay, so whatever definition we have specified for this particular edit text, this definition is associated with the object of type edit text whose name is name edit text by using the find view by id button. And again we need to typecast it to the edit text class. That's why here it is typecasted as this one. Okay, so this is the definition of the onCreate function. It means onCreate function said whatever layout we have created in the our activity underscore main.xml file to this particular main activity file .java file, and then it associates the our edit text resource from the layout file with the object of the edit text which we have declared here, whose name is name edit text. For that it uses find view by id button. Right. Then as I said earlier, in the layout activity underscore main.xml file, which is layout file, for the definition of this particular button, if we see here, this is the first button, and in this first button there is one property that is say called as the on click. Okay, and its value is on click add details, right? And this on click add details specify that whenever this button is clicked, then it should call a method whose name is on click add details method, and it's our responsibility or Android developer's responsibility to implement this method into the that particular activity. In this case, name of the activity is main activity.java file. That is why if you observe it carefully, on click add details is the method which is implemented here in main activity.java file. Okay, it means whenever user clicks on this particular save button, it will call the on click add details method of the main activity.java file, and it accepts object of the view class. Right, whenever user clicks on this save data button, then what should happen is that whatever data is entered by the user into this particular text box or edit text, it will be that should be extracted. Okay, and at the same time we need to check whether this particular edit text is blank or not. That is why here we are checking this with using the if statement. If name edit text dot get text, it will extract the text whatever user has entered there, and then this length method will return the number of characters or length in the form of number of characters. Okay, and if its length is not equal to 0, it means this particular edit text is not an empty. In that case only we have to execute this code, and if this condition is not true, it means length of the edit text is 0. It indicates that user has user doesn't have entered any data into the edit text. In that case we have to display a message, enter some data to the user using the toast.makeText, using toast class and by using the makeText method of the toast class. Okay, so considering user has entered some data, now it will come into the if statement, right? Then we have to create a class to add the values into the database, right? And there is one class in Android that is called as the content values. So here we are creating object of the content values with the name values. So content values equal to new content values. This particular statement will create an empty set of values using the default initial size. Initial size, it means we can specify the size of the variables as well, but here whatever default size will be there, using that particular size it will create an empty set of values. Okay, so in that set there is no contents or no items inserted into the that particular set. Then what we have to do, we have to fetch the text which we have user has entered into the edit text or text box, and we have to add that text into this empty set which has created by this content values class, right? So for that we are calling the put function on the values object. See here, values is the object of type content values class, and this put function or put method, what it does, again it put the contents into this empty set as a key value pair, as I said earlier in case of the hash map array, right? So what it does, this put function does, it accepts two arguments, right? So first one is the key, in this case it is name variable, and the name variable belongs to the my content provider, and since this is a static variable name, it can be accessed by using dot operator. So my content provider dot name, it indicates toward the variable name which we have declared in the my content provider dot java file. Okay, if you see here, this is that name and this is the static variable, that's why we are accessing that using dot operator. Okay, so this name will be replaced by the string name, and another parameter is that whatever value is entered by the user into the edit text, so that value is retrieved by using the same method which we have used in the onCreate function. So using the find hue by id, and we are passing r.id.textName, which is the id of the edit text we have defined in the layout file. Okay, and we are calling get text method on this particular object. So this get text method will extract whatever text user has entered into the edit text, but it is in the form of hue object. That is why we need to convert that to the string. That is why here we are using toString method. Okay, so when this value dot put method is executed, then every time it will add a key value pair. For example, here the my content provider dot name, its value is a say name. Okay, this is a key, and its actual value will be whatever user has entered into this particular edit text. Suppose user entered Pankaj here into this particular text box, so it will be extracted by this get text method and it will be converted to the toString, and here it will be Pankaj. Okay, so this value dot put function will insert such type of key value pair. In this, name is the key and Pankaj is the value of this key. In short, we can say name is the name is the column, name is the name of database, say table name, table column, and Pankaj is the value of that particular column. Okay, so every time whenever this particular function is executed, it will add such a pairs to this empty set which is created by this content value whose name is values. Suppose second time it has executed, then it will again add the another pair like this one. First will be a name, and suppose user has entered say Priya as a name, his or her name. Okay, so at first index it will be store this key value pair, at second index this empty this values set will be contain this key value pair. In second case, name this is a key whose name is name, and this is the value of the that particular key, which is a Priya. Right. Okay. So in this way, depending upon the data entry made by the user, this particular empty set will be filled by this values dot put method. Right. Once this values array or value set is initialized to some data of key value pair, the next step is we have to insert this key value pair data into the database using the content URI. Okay. Now here we see here we are in the my main activity.java file, and we are now inserting this key value pair data into the database using the content provider. Okay. So here get content resolver, any activity cannot have an access to the content provider directly. Okay. So any activity or fragment can access the content provider through the content resolver. That is why here get content resolver function is called. This will provide access to the content resolver, and content resolver has access to the content provider. Right. So content resolver, we are calling the insert method on this content resolver, and we are passing two parameters to the insert function. First parameter is the content URI. In our case, it is the content underscore URI, again which is the static variable of this my content provider class. Okay. So if you see here in my content provider.java file, so value of content underscore URI is nothing but this is the parsed value of the URL, and value of URL is this whole string. Eventually this string will be like this one. Okay. So this is the content URI of our application which we are passing here, and next our second parameter is the actual values which we want to insert into the database. Right. So whenever this insert function is called, then it will call the insert abstract method of the my content provider, which is here. Right. So as I said earlier, this insert method accepts two arguments. First one is the URI object, another is the values whose type is content values, and these values will be supplied or provided by the class which calls this particular method. So in this case, main activity is calling this function and providing the values of these two parameters. Okay. So content URI which we have passed here will be stored into this URI object, and whatever values in the form of key value pair like this one will be which are stored into this values set, these values will be stored into this content values. Right. Then we have seen this definition in previous lecture, so I think there is no need to explain in detail. Okay. So here we are calling insert function on the DB object which is of type SQLite database, and we are passing the name of table and then values which we have received in from this particular insert function. Okay. So it will insert this key value pair which are received from this particular insert function into the table whose name is specified by this table underscore name variable, and this table underscore name variable is nothing but it is a users table. See here, table underscore name is the users. It means, in short, whatever values are entered by the users, that values will be stored into the database through the content providers. Again, it is notified to the content resolver using this particular three statements if there is successful insertion of the record into the database.